I'd like to thank all the senior members and colleagues from Thames College as well, and welcome all the participants for these discussions. So what I'll do first is I'll request each of the panelists to share very short, 2 to 3 minutes remarks on the theme of this event itself. So the theme is we have promoting community and environmental sustainability. So without further ado, may I request Nanji to share some remarks?
Let me just say a few things. For things to be sustainable in our context, in the context of mountain, in the context of mountains of India, Nepal, Bhutan, where economic prosperity is not very high, we have to develop and support people in producing and in implementing simple solutions. Solutions which they themselves can do. Even if it is a technologically advanced solution, it has to be simplified in a way that the way, say, mobile is simplified today, that anyone can use mobile after a few minutes of training. Even the smartphone can be used by very old people who have not used even phones, but just simple. So things have to be really, really simplified if we want it to be taken up by a very, very huge population, large population. And the extent of problem which we have, 40% of the world poor live here, it has to be something which everyone can do. Not only a few schemes of the government with some subsidy here and there. I was once in Uttarakhand district and I was asking the district collector that, okay, so what are you doing for climate change? And he said, oh, we have many schemes. So how many farmers have you benefited? They said, oh, this year we benefited 200 farmers in the district. And you know how many farmers are there in the district? 200,000 farmers. And with 200,000 farmers, you feel proud that you are benefiting 200 farmers. The problem is not going to be solved. And I don't blame him, because the governments cannot reach everyone. So we have to develop a mechanism, systems which can be replicated on its own on a very, very large scale. That's the main point which I would want to make.
The two of the good messages that I received just from your speech is that we have to come up with simple solutions, and that our reach has to be made in such a way that it's accessible to every corners of the society. With this, I'd like to request my colleague Iris to share some light.
Hi everyone. To reintroduce myself, I'm Iris Lekanger and I work with Nand as the Program Officer for the Himalayan Climate Change Adaptation Program at ICIMOD. I understand that many of you here today are students who might be itching to start getting out and making positive change right now. So, instead of talking too much about my work at ICIMOD, I thought that instead I would share a little bit about what I did when I was an undergraduate student. I studied anthropology and sociology at the University of Durham, where, as our host has already mentioned, I was involved with a group called the Durham University International Development Society. The purpose of the society was to provide support to grassroots development projects by offering the time, knowledge and resources that we had as students and academics at the university. The important part about this was that we didn't show up with a pre-prepared idea of what we wanted to do. We asked local organizations what they wanted to do, and then we saw what we could do to help them. This was how I got involved with a project called the Uganda Banana Syrup Project in southwest Uganda. The problem, as the NGO explained it to us, was this. Bananas, which are the main food staple in Uganda and as important there as rice is here, were dying. A new banana wilt disease had spread across the district, having a severe impact on food security in a district that was already very poor. There was one variety of banana called mbire, which seemed to be resistant to the disease. But the people in the district didn't eat that banana because they found it too bitter, and instead they used it to make a local alcohol called waraji. So the local NGO asked us, could we do anything to help with the wilt problem? It was clear from the beginning, after we started visiting Uganda on our holidays and working on the project back in England, that we couldn't cure the wilt, because that was beyond our skills as a group of students and academics. But we started looking at the mbire bananas. Was there some way that we could refine them to make them more appealing to eat? The local partner had an idea, because his mother had used to make a sweet syrup from the bananas, which he didn't see people making very much anymore. And that syrup seemed to be a very good idea, because it could be used as a high-energy food supplement for people who weren't getting enough to eat, And if we could come up with a manufacturing process and market it as a healthy, sustainable alternative to sugar, it could also bring some income generation to the communities. So, our students from different disciplines started working. We had food science students who tested the nutritional value of the syrup. We had tested it in different recipes and tried to see what the uses could be. We had engineering students working on the mechanism to make the syrup, which we tried to make more efficient and hygienic than the traditional method. And the social science students got to work on managing the project, fundraising in England, and building the partnerships with the local NGO and the communities. So, I hope that we were of help to the people that we were working with in Uganda, and at the same time, we students also gained a lot from the experience. We gained experience with running a grassroots development projects, working with partners. We got to test out different skills, which I know that many of us have been able to use in our later careers. And the project also sparked my interest in locally based agricultural development, which is a topic that has shaped my career and which I've been lucky to be able to work on at EasyMod as well. So, my main message to you is this. You don't have to wait until you've graduated to start making the change you want to see. As students, you have resources which can be very valuable, especially to grassroots and community projects. You're learning valuable knowledge and skills. And, maybe most importantly, you have enthusiasm, time and energy to put into these efforts. At the same time, getting involved with projects like this can really help your own education, because it will give you a chance to learn different skills and also to try out what you might want to do in the future. So, the second point that I want to make is that this is really a story about partnership. It was a partnership between us at the university, the local NGO and the local communities. And since we're here to talk about creating a platform for collaboration between people from different backgrounds and skills, I thought I would share with you what this project and my work at EasyMod and Santosh has taught me about partnership. And that is that true partnership is based on respect. Respect for the fact that everyone who is part of the partnership is bringing their own unique skills, knowledge and resources to the table, and that the joint work would not succeed if one of these were missing. And respect for local communities and local knowledge, which Nan touched upon, is especially important. Because in the end, the local communities are the only ones that know what they need and what will and will not work in their own community and culture. Local communities also have a wealth of knowledge about their local environment and their traditional ways of doing things. And I truly believe that without drawing on this local knowledge, it will be very hard for any efforts for environmental sustainability at the community level to succeed. To give you another example, like Nan mentioned, in EasyMod we have a pilot project called Resilient Mountain Villages, which we're implementing in Kavre district of Nepal. As part of this pilot project, we've developed a biofertilizer and biopesticide called Jolmol, which people can easily home make using locally available resources. Jolmol is based on a traditional practice, but we've used scientific knowledge to refine and standardize it. And it's been hugely successful and popular. We see the farmers growing more and more produce using organic methods, and we also have had farmers approach us and say that they would like to go full organic after having the experience of using Jolmol. And I think that that success comes especially from this combination of traditional practice with scientific knowledge, and it builds on the partnership between the local communities, the national NGO CPRED, and EasyMod, which is a regional international organization. So, this combination of tradition and science and equal respect-based partnerships, I believe, are the key to achieving a more sustainable world. And I would encourage each of you to bring the unique skills and resources that you have at your disposal into such partnerships to find more of these solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Iris. I think those were really, really good, quite a good number of suggestions and the key messages that you've highlighted. I'm not going to repeat them. I think it was very clear to the audience. So what I'd like to request the participants to also do is keep note of the key questions that you might have based on the deliberations from our speakers, and we might have some time to reflect back on them. I'd like to now request our youth representative, Ms. Bindu Bandari, to share some remarks.
Thank you so much. Wow, feels so good to be here in front of this intellectual mass with the huge youth participation. Hello and namaste, I am Bindu Bandari. Okay, I should say Dr. Bindu Bandari. I graduated recently. I'll be adding more on this later. I have been working in environmental campaigning for the last 3.5 years. And in this time span, I have realized many things which I think I will be sharing later. I would like to add just on what Nanda sir said. He said that a very impressive and insightful story about losing the key. I, as a youth, how I take it is that if I lose a key, first I don't look at the place, first I look it within myself, if it is stuck in my pockets, if I forget to check there. So as a youth, I believe change should start with myself, and for any positive change, I should see myself first. That is what I believe. And as a youth, one of those 1.8 billion youths around the world, I believe that I am the youth who lives in present, yet I don't fear to live in the world of imagination for the future. And as a youth, I dream of a young world where youth take the lead, not on the future, but at the present. That is what I believe, and that is what I aspire to be in my lifetime. And I would like to add, it may be interesting to share that I just mentioned that Dr. Bindu Bandari. Actually, I'm a veterinarian. I graduated just a few months ago, and officially I'm a doctor now. And many times when I go for the campaigning and I travel, I get questions from the youth, fellow youths like you, like how come a veterinarian be advocating on issues of environment and sustainability? That is what I would like to focus on. As our theme we can see here, community and promoting community and environmental sustainability, I believe that environment and community are not the topics to be dealt solely by the faculties of the social work or let's say social science students. It is an integrated, it is an inclusive topic which should equally concern each and every of us. So is the reason that despite being veterinarian by profession, I have been engaged for the last couple of years in the field of environment and sustainability. I'll be sharing my experience and insights later. For now, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Bindu, and congratulations once again for obtaining your doctorate in veterinary science, right? So I think that was quite interesting to see that the sectors which we don't think are rightly connected to the theme of environment could also play active role in the advocacy. So what we'll do now is we'll go with some of the key questions. So if I may start, how many of us have heard the definition of sustainability or sustainable development? Do any of us know what does that really mean? Okay, so I see a few of the hands, and I think maybe it's part of your course studies itself. So I'm not going to define sustainably myself, but I'd request maybe starting with Nandaji. So if I was a very lay person, I didn't know what we were talking about, and someone comes to me and asks me about gives me lectures about sustainability and we should be doing sustainable development and all. So how would you define sustainability in a very generic term to a very common person? And what do we really mean, when we say that we're working for environmental sustainability or sustainable mountain development? If you could share some light on that.
Okay, apart from theoretical definition of sustainability, if I were asked what sustainable development would mean, I would look at, since I'm already in my late 40s and I can say something with because of my age also, because I'm almost double of most of you in age, that what I leave for my children and my next generation, they should feel that I have left something more than what I got from my previous generation. And it's not only me, that the people in my generation should leave the place with this kind of message, or to giving a feeling to the new generation that we are living with much more than what we got. And its environment, its social values, it's not economic development only. It's not the wealth that I created 5 houses and my father had only 2 and my sons will create 10. No, that's not. It's just that as a society, we leave a better society behind us. So that's what I would say the fundamental thing, and whatever it takes to do that. And throughout apply your common sense and given knowledge to ensure that the fundamental thing, don't forget the fundamental thing, that we have to leave this world better than before. That's what, if the aim is, we will find our ways to do sustainable development. You all are a student of social science and environment, so I don't want to really give you a lecture on that part, but this fundamental aim should be sufficient, I guess.
Thank you, Nanji. If I speak with
Sure. So I think the concept of sustainability, you can define it in two different ways. One is the simple way, which is development that sustains, that instead of just doing a project and leaving it at that and having it be finished when the project is over, you should, like Nan said, give some solutions which can carry on and which the communities can keep on using after you're gone. The other part is sort of a reaction to the previous definition that we had of development, which was based on this, Mr. Shaishan mentioned at the beginning, this drive for gold, this unlimited growth that our economic system for so long has been seeking. And our idea previously was that in order to develop societies, we needed to model them after this Western model of high production and high consumption, and everyone needs to have as much as possible. And later on we have realized that that's not actually realistic, because if everybody lived like, say, in my country, in Norway, if everybody in the world lived like Norwegian people, we would need 9 planets. So clearly what we need is not for everybody else to get up to that level, but for the Norwegian people and other people like us to calm down a little bit, and then to find a new model which lives in harmony with the natural limitations that we have from our nature, and find ways where people can live healthy and happy lives, which aren't based on just using and creating as much as possible and using our natural resources too much.
Thank you, Iris. I think you brought a very good angle, bringing your experience from the developed countries like Norway as well. So one very good thing of working at Easymore is that we have people from different regions. We have around 300 staff at this time, and I think we have around people from 22 nationalities. So I think it's quite interesting to work there. And I also just realized that we have representation of panelists from different sectors and different regions as well, which is a good thing. So if Bindu would want to comment on that.
Yeah, sure. For me, no vague definitions. Just to be clear and to the point so that even the layman can understand, for me, sustainability is a continuity, but a fair continuity. Because on Earth, everything is a continuous process from generations to generations. We have been living, not only we, but even other organisms. So it is a continuity, but a fair continuity. What I mean to say here is that the ability to maintain intergenerational equity. I would define sustainability as the ability to interact with all this ecosystem and all these components that are present in the earth fairly, in the way my grandfathers did and in the way my grandchildren can do, in similar way that I am doing. So that, for me, that is the sustainability.
Thank you. Now, linking this, the aspects of sustainable development, sustainability in terms of the environment, because I think we can take the discourse of the sustainable development to 3 major sectors, right? We can talk about environmental, sustainable development, and economic development and social development. But since we have the expertise from the environment sector much, I'd just like to know something about that context. So if I may start with Nanji, what linkages do you see in the narratives of the climate change, global warming, which we discussed, which you shared with us before, and narrative between that and the environmental sustainability? What is the relation that we have?
Okay, most of us and global leaders are seeing climate change as a risk, as a threat, which is true also. It is somebody very well known said once that climate change is a result of and is the biggest threat to development. So it's because of all the economic development which we have done, climate change has happened, and now it is going to eat all the development itself. So that's the direct link already. Nevertheless, when we, in the beginning at the coffee, we were discussing about the opportunities also. The kind of opportunity it can offer to reinvent ourselves as an individual, as a society, and as a country and nation and the world. For example, we talked about the cars, diesel cars being banned, and I read a news a few days ago where it said that by 2030 we will not even see the diesel and petrol cars on the road anywhere in the world, and so many other positive changes happening. And you saw in my slide that only 2 minutes of energy, solar energy, is enough to meet the needs of the entire globe for 1 year. So if we turn this risk, threat, challenge into opportunity, we have a lot of hope. But that to happen, some fundamental changes, like Iris also mentioned, that the Western world, the way the things have developed there, because during that time in the 50s, in the 60s or 19th centuries, that was the thinking that economic development is the most important, and they slowly realized that, oh no, that's not the best way. And now we see many more people going back to nature and thinking more about sustainability and peace of the mind rather than just economic development goal. So those things slowly have to change. And what could be the better place to do this than the colleges and schools like this, who should slowly in their curriculum include these things. Madam was mentioning in the morning that when we were child, even I also remembered that we were taught by our school that we keep our dust papers and chocolate toffee wrappers in our pocket, and whenever we find a dustbin, we should put that in the dustbin. And now we see, particularly I come from Delhi and I see on the streets of Delhi people pulling their window down, and Madam also explained that the same thing, and throwing water bottle, this kind of plastic water bottle without bothering about. So this kind of, in the pursuit of goal of economic development, we have forgotten some fundamental principles, basics of life. That needs to come back, and schools, colleges, educational institutions should begin working on that.
Thank you, Nanji. I think you rightly brought the connect to my next question, so which is about youth, and I'd like to start this question with Bindu. So in the discourse of sustainability, where do you think youth comes in the picture, and what roles do you think they are playing and can play to ensure that we have a sustainable future for next generation?
As a youth and as a campaigner for the last couple of years, what I have realized that the role of the youth is crucial in one biggest task, that is connecting the dots. We have a huge gap, be it between the policymakers to the common people, or be it between the researchers and the diplomats. There is a gap, and the gap is the main cause for all the hindrances in all the development process or in the understanding of the terms like sustainable development. And I as a youth believe that youth will have the greatest role in bridging those gaps that lies maybe, let's say between the societal fields and the environmental fields, maybe between the diplomat and the lay person. So what we can do at our individual level is that we can bridge that gap. That doesn't need to be that we need to go to the diplomat and connect it to the farmer. If we are not able to do that, at least we can connect our teachers to our parents. That is what we can do at individual level. It is all about connecting the dots, what youth can do, and that is, I think, the feasible and most crucial task that youth need to do at this time.
Thank you, Bindu. I think you rightly pointed out the main important factor that as a youth can play, right? The bridging the gap between different sectors, and I think you've been playing that part in various occasions in the past few years as well. Now I'd like to slightly move the context of this discussion to something that I heard during presentation, and that Nanji talked about resilient mountain village, right? So there's this discourse on adaptation, mitigation, and recently we've come across the discourse on resilience. I don't know, I'm sure many of us have heard that term, but maybe we don't really understand what we really mean by, I am resilient, or let's say this mountain village is a resilient mountain village. So I just wanted to know from, Iris and Nanji as well. So what do we understand when we hear that this particular mountain village is resilient? And what it takes for a society to be resilient. So my next question would be like, is resilience a precondition for sustainable development? So if I may start from Yeah, Iris can.
Thank you. If I may make a comment on the youth question first. I really agree with what you said. I think another thing that is very important that youth can do is that from the scope of your imagination. Because like we mentioned before, to make sustainable development, to make an environmentally sustainable future, we need a new model. We need a new model for how to develop our communities, how to develop our economies. And like Nan said early on today, that the older you get, the more limited your imagination tends to get, and the more stuck into the same sort of ways of thinking you tend to become. And I think that youth have the unparalleled advantage that you have much more scope for imagining these bold new futures in a way that older people cannot. So that was just what I wanted to say on that. On the question about resilience, I think the simple definition of resilience is the idea that when a shock happens, a community should be strong enough to withstand that shock and come out of it stronger, or at least as healthy as it was before it happened. And we can see this, you know, I always say that Nepali people are extremely resilient. And that was something that I observed especially during the 2015 earthquake. Because that was when I saw people banding together, helping each other. All of the best relief and all of the best rescue work was being done by private individuals, small local organizations, you know, people who wanted to organize for their communities and work. And that type of resilience, that way of looking after yourself and looking after your neighbors and looking after your community, I think is very important.
Of course, I work in climate and with the CMOD, so exact definitions are quite important for us. Resilience, sustainability, environment and adaptations, we debate a lot on those issues, but here I don't want to do that. And my advice would be that don't get into, definitions important, you learn that, but what is important is to understand what as a society we want to achieve. A resilient society, a society that thrives on its own, you can call it whatever name you want, whatever name you feel comfortable, you give. We gave it Resilient Mountain Solutions because development world is fond of new phrases. We love, every few years, 10, 15 years, we have to talk about some new words, new phrases, so that we can garner the attention. So that apart, the fundamental thing is that we have to look at ourselves, our own society, that how this could be, how this could be best be thriving. An example of earthquake, we did not give any name to pre-earthquake, that if earthquake happen, our society will be resilient, but it happened, and it really, because all of us came out with whatever we knew and whatever means we could support each other. And this video, which Mr. Serchan showed us this morning, just by helping the next one, first of all, you are helping yourself, because you feel happy if you have helped someone, don't you? I think each of us feel happy if we have helped somebody smile. Second, you are inspiring that person to learn from you to help others. And the third, then the chain begins, and then many more people, and then you get into a whole positive setting. It's easier said than done in a competitive, very, very competitive environment. But nevertheless, I would say compete with yourself. That should be the competition. That's what the sustainability and everything will run much longer than if you try to say compete with others and do not really help. So my take on these things will be this. I wouldn't really, so in the Resilient Mountain Village, I want to give one example. We worked with them to develop a program, and without too much of investment, very, very minimal investment. But since it was so decentralized and they were so open to give their ideas, and we were extremely open to receive their ideas, they came up with a brilliant idea themselves. They said, we need to keep our village clean. And it was actually Iris who traveled there, and she mentioned this village doesn't look that clean, although we are working here. And then we just talked about, and then next month when we went there, they had introduced a program for themselves. 29 days for ourselves, 1 day for the community. And on that 1 day, they would clean the whole village on a community basis. And that's what I would say, we can we can put it in any definition of developmental phrases or new words, and but that's what we need to build on. Sorry.
Yes. Thank you, Nanji. I think so. The message of your last comment is that more than the theoretical understanding of the things, the action has to be made into the focus of our work, right? So I just now wanted to touch upon the similar context with IRIS. So because you've been working with the communities for quite some time, and then you come from the other region, but you've had the experience of working in this region. So you might have a different look, different view of understanding, their challenges, problems, and agendas. So, if I may ask, in the context of Nepal, do you find any gaps or challenges in the development process in terms of environmental sustainability? And if you do find them, what do you think will be the feasible and efficient steps to address and bridge those gaps?
That's a good question. Thanks. I think, like I mentioned before, Nepali people have many of the components to address environmental sustainability. They're a very resilient society. They have all of these, this connection to the mountains and to nature. I think what I see often is missing is that there isn't enough education that is made publicly available for people at the community level about things like why climate change is happening, what are the likely effects going to be, what can people do to address those effects, what can they do to be more sustainable, what are the benefits of being more sustainable. I mean, we mentioned before about this JOMO, this biofertilizer and pesticide that we have in the resilient mountain villages. And what we had early on from our community members who were starting to use this was that when they were growing these organic vegetables, suddenly people didn't want to buy them in the market because organic vegetables tend to be smaller, they tend to be a bit uglier, more bumpy, not as big and shiny and nicely colored as the chemically grown vegetables are. And so in the local market, people didn't want to buy them, even though our farmers were saying, but I know that the cauliflower that I'm growing is so much more tasty than the cauliflower that looks big and nice and shiny, I know this, and I know that it's so much more healthy. So I think that making that information accessible and making that, because people, once they have the information and once they have the tools, they can do amazing things. And I think that information and those tools are really the main thing that are preventing people from making change in their communities.
Thank you, Iris. I think you brought a very, very good point, and you also sort of connected the theme of this event and also the education sector, right? Because you think that education plays an important role in making them understand different aspects of our society, and the access to information is something that could be a very good factor which bridges the gap. Now I'd like to slightly move on to the Youth Connect as well, because in Nepal, not only in Nepal, in the South Asian continent whole itself, we see a lot of youth migration in other parts of the region to earn their bread. But youth, I think, are the powerhouse of the nation, right? But so in the context of Nepal, as a youth campaigner, do you find is the current youth participation and advocacy encouraging in the relation of social work? Are there more young people really working like the way that the video was showing in their community as such? And why do you think youth could be one of the key stakeholders in achievement of the sustainable development goals?
Yes. As a youth myself, what I have experienced and what I have realized is that we have been doing a lot, but basically it is without a purpose. And this is what I have felt. Youth participation is huge and is appreciable if talking about the latest decade. I have seen everywhere I go, I see so many youths interested in doing some campaigns, and every other day there are so many other trainings targeted for youth, led by the youth. But as I said, in most of the cases, we lack a purpose. We do the event just because we know that we need to do the event. Just taking an example of All Environment Day, we see a huge number of events which are led by youth, coordinated by youth. But what then? What is the purpose of that? It is, yeah, I totally agree that education is one of the prime factor, but more than that, I would like to add that it is not just about the education. With our literacy rate currently above 60%, let's say, it is not only the matter of the education, it is more about the attitude that we have. What we need to develop is the attitude. The education that we have is currently centered only in the books and only on the curriculum. But if, until and unless we practice those education and bring it into our attitude, this won't work. So yes, youth participation is appreciable, yet I feel that somehow it is lacking purpose. And the next thing I would like to mention is, like as I'm working, and I'm working at grassroots level and attending several other international conferences and working on advocacy at international level as well, what I find is youth are doing their parts, youth are raising voice, but the question is their voice being heard? We are making noises, we are creating that momentum, but the thing is that, are they really being heard? Like, are they taken into consideration? What happens most of the time is, I go to the interventions like this, like I get invitations, I go there, and like after my speech, like I get a huge applaud, wow, you speak so well, wow, this is what I hear. But we are limited only to this. Not because youth are limited only to this, they have been the, let's say, the character of appreciation only and not the stakeholder. I think, like for youth, to match their momentum, to match their energy with their participation, what we need to do is treat them as a stakeholder, not only as a character for the appreciation. And if we can do that, of course, their participation is appreciable, and if we can encourage them by treating them as a key stakeholder, then obviously youth can take the lead and they will be leading by example. That is what I have felt.
Thanks, Bindu. I think that was very nicely put. So maybe I'll like to follow up with Nanji about the same question. So she mentioned that, you know, youth of today lack purpose, and then there's no sustainable way of engaging them in our work. Do you really think that youth lack purpose? And if they do, what is it that we need to do to gain their purpose back?
Let me go back to my days of my university days when I was doing my bachelor's. And I think I was at a number of times felt purposeless. What do? I don't know. Sometimes the pressure, oh my God, I have been studying for 6 years. I need to get a job somehow immediately. Otherwise, my neighbors, my parents, my relatives, they will say, what are you doing? 6 years studying away from home, still you have not got a job, still dependent on parents. This pressure was mentally there. I was trying for admission in medical college. Couple of years failure, nothing worked. What do? Oh my God, I'm a hopeless person. So this pressure also comes on. And then someday something clicks, then we feel as if we found our way to do. But if I reflect back on those days, one thing is very clear, which I know that what I was wanting at that time, I always wanted to do something different. That was very clear on those days also, because I got admission in some very prestigious course of a university, which was #1 course, because that was prestigious. Everyone wanted that course. I didn't want that course because no, I wanted to be different. That's what was the driving me. I think you all need to also identify what drives you the most. And I think relatives, parents and friends, they will all fall in line if you just go by what is most exciting to you. And I just take one sentence from what Bindu said, stakeholders. Don't wait for governments and your school principal or your chairman or the prime minister of the country to treat you as a stakeholder. First, you have to treat yourself as a stakeholder. And I think most of the youth don't do that. They I'm reflecting on myself. Many of times I would not treat myself as a stakeholder of something going wrong in the university because I felt, no, how much I can fight. Let me first worry about my grades exam tomorrow, which if I fail, I will be in big trouble. So those things at some stage just keep reflecting back. And another thing, note down. Although nowadays in the days of mobile and Facebook, not many people use diary. But if you have this habit, buy a diary. If you have it, write in it, maybe even once in a month, even on a New Year day, if you write it. Please take my word, you will remember it for 20 years later that, okay, yes, you wrote that you want to do this, that will drive you. If you don't like that, cut it after 2 days, 5 days, 1 month, but write something. That is really, really helpful. So that's how you can connect and make yourself stakeholder than waiting for somebody else to become stakeholder.
Thank you, Nancy. I think that was a very, very good point that you pointed out. I think the idea is to make yourself available, right? Make yourself to be, engaging in the opportunities that you get. And I'm just wondering if, when you talked about keeping notes in diaries, would it be okay if I take notes in my mobile instead?
Well, if you ask me, I keep both actually, diary as well as in my mobile. But when I want to rely more, I rely more on my diary myself. But it's individual's choice. Definitely individual choice, but I can tell you one thing, and at least people who are senior to me or of me, they would agree that writing in a diary has its own importance and value. Click a picture of this and keep it in your mobile or type it in but handwriting is something which actually science has also proven. I recently read, I just remembered, that when you write something by hand, it gets more into your mind than you type something. And it's a proven, it's like, economic development model of 60s when everyone wanted to go for money. And then now, 50 years later, we realize that that's not really the goal. Similarly, why to write? Even my son does when I tell him write, he always types it. He always, it really get onto my nerve. Why can't you write a sentence in your notebook rather than just typing all the time? So, but it's just, it's the way you are, no problem even with that. But as far as I'm concerned, and I definitely don't want to impose my views on you, but I believe that despite all the digital communication, it's really good to have a handwritten diary, and that will be much more emotional to you than your digital diary after 20 years, 15 years, or 10 years.
Thank you, Nancy. I think that was a very correct statement that you made, which applies to me as well. I prefer writing in the paper with pens as well. So we've come towards the closing of this session, but I'd like to have some questions from the floor, if there are any. So we might take maybe a couple of questions, 3 to 5, and then ask the panelists to say their closing remarks.
My name is Dio Sulak. I'm from Premier College, and my question is to Noenji, and that is, what is the difference between goals and objective and purpose? I don't know. I tried to find it in Oxford, but it is not. That's
very interesting.
Sachet Guru, alumni of Thames College. I was just wondering the fact that since the country is going through an election process, we had the Local Self-Governance Act endorsed by the government and the UNDP like a couple of years back. And then there was a definite process of the 14 planning process, which really focused on the sustainability of not just community and environment, but all the other different aspects. But now when the election is halfway around and there is no such act that governs the local people, that what even you guys are talking about, especially focusing on community. So when there is no such policy or act in place, how do you think it hampers the ongoing process of SDG and etc. So the work Isimot is doing, the work Bindu is doing with in different local levels, how do you think it affects the progress of the country? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I think we better take those two questions first, and then we'll move on to other questions. So if Nanji or any other want to respond to the two questions first, maybe first the question on purpose and goals and objectives. What are the differences?
Since it was addressed to me, I'll try to answer. I don't feel myself competent to answer the question to differentiate. I mean, of course, you can look at the definitions and understand, but my answer would be more from the purpose of what. Okay, let me just, first of all, goal is a long-term, what you want to really achieve in your life. That's the basic thing, very basic, and I think everyone knows. And objective is more of a medium duration, what you can get to, how do you want to, it gets little bit into how do you achieve that part and contributes to your larger goal of life. And goal can be a bit abstract also. It doesn't, but objectives are more concrete and doable. And purpose is basically your action that leads to, you link your action to something which will directly lead to your objective, and then, so it's a hierarchical, as far as I understand, it's a more of a hierarchical thing, that goal, objective, purpose, it moves in that direction. But more importantly, if you just close your eyes and think that what do you want to do in 10 years' time, and you may not get an answer easily. It's not easy. Nevertheless, keep thinking. Maybe you will change your plan for few after some time. That's also fine. But at least think about it. Don't get dragged so much with your day-to-day life or day-to-day interaction with colleagues and teachers, and if you don't reflect on your priorities for life after 10-15 years, and if you get too much into it, you divert your mind from your actual what you want to do. So please do spend some time thinking on those lines, and that actually helps even in my office, in workplace, not only any workplace. If we get too much into, then we will start fighting with colleagues, we'll start appreciating a colleague. But if we have our goals clear, that I am here in this institution for 15 years, and in 15 years I want to achieve these things, then I would ignore smaller things. I would focus on larger things. And then probably I would be a better colleague, I would be a better professional also, because I will look at things more objectively, rather than worrying about that, oh, this guy did not acknowledge my role in my, in his book is published, etc. These are minor things. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Nancy. If any of us would want to answer the second question.
And the local governance, how does it hamper the progress of
yeah, sure. So, yes, rightly pointed out, rightly in the face of time that local election, the second phase is coming. And talking about the policies, what I say is that it is not only about saying about the policies. Like at times we are saying like Nepal is so rich in rules, regulations and policies, but what matters here is the implementation. It is not necessarily that one advocates and keep on uttering that, okay, these goals we have, but even if without saying, like Sir said, like we have so many terms and terminologies each like in each decade. It is not only about the terminologies, but it is more about the practice. So what we need to focus here is that even if they are not advocating or they are not keeping it, let's say the term sustainability in their agenda, but what matters is if they will really practice it, like if that will be into their actions. So here what matters is the practice and the actions more than the rules and the regulation, or let's say the written form. Of course, like sustainability isn't a term to be defined, I think, because it is so vague and it encompasses so many sectors. In every sector, like even if they haven't mentioned, but if they think of, like if they practice it, if they bring into action, then sustainability would be defined itself. So I believe that it is not necessary that we write it, like we have some written evidences of the sustainability in the agenda, but what is important for us at this crucial phase is that it be implied in our actions, and our local government, those who are the candidates, they take it into their actions more than into their words. That is what I feel.
So maybe we can take two more questions.
I'm Prajwal Bikram Bista, a recent high school graduate from St. Xavier's College. And recently Aris ma'am, she talked about, she said that our main problem is education, because we don't have education in rural, remote areas. But if had the education been the main problem, why isn't Kathmandu one of the most beautiful cities? I just would like to question that. And pointing out that thing, Dr. Bindu, she said that, yes, education is the problem, it's about our attitude. So changing attitude is what she prioritized. But recently, throughout this session, what we figure out is that we just heard everyone pointing out the problems. They were just pointing out the problems, this is problem, this is problem, this is problem. But none of them said, what are the solutions of this problem? So how can we change the attitude? How can youth change their attitude and maybe make not only the city center of Kathmandu a concrete jungle, I say, and rather the whole Nepal one of the beautiful country? Thank you.
think that was a very nice question. Iris, would you like to respond?
Sure. So, your point is very good and very well taken. I think when I talk about education, I don't necessarily mean formal education in the form of what one might jump to when you think about this. It's not necessarily about literacy rate. It's, you know, you talk about attitude changing and changing attitudes, and I think that education is a way of doing that. Education through awareness spreading and showing people why it's important to take care of the environment, for example. Why and how they can address these problems. And that's the type of education that I talk about when I'm talking about education, not just how literate people are or, you know, how much mathematics they know necessarily.
Maybe I'd like to add up in here. Yes, we talked about education, we talked about attitude change, but talking about the solutions, I'd like to come back to what our Nanda sir said. Treat yourself as a stakeholder and do not wait for some others to come and say, okay, you are the stakeholder to bring this then. So as a youth, we have that energy, we have that imagination, so let us utilize that and let us lead by example. Because I have seen that positive attitude is contagious, like it spreads so fast. So let us be that example. Why not treat ourselves as a stakeholder? I think that will be the feasible solution for this.
Hello, I'm Samiksha Batra from St. Xavier's College. And my question is for Nanda sir. You mentioned at the beginning that 40% of the world poor live in this region. My question is, how do economic development come in relation with sustainable development? Because economic development is one of the burning issue in this region. We are one of the poorest regions. So how do sustainable development come in relationship with this issue, economic development issue?
Very good question, and a fundamental question. I think during our talks we did little bit talk about economic development, more in the sense of that we are not following the right path by following the economic development. And when I said this, I think we just need some good corrective course on this. What is happening that at this moment, or say last 30 to 40 years, capitalism has become much more important. And you might have read this report from Oxfam, which said that top 10 people, richest 10 people in the world have half of the, their wealth is equal to half of the poorest people of the world. So those kind of things. And somehow our governments, and democratic government particularly, they need to reflect on this, that what kind of policies we bring in that does not really reward too much. I think this is disproportional reward for their hard work, that they have got so much of money. And that's where the problem is. And recently I was reading an article which said that somehow we followed different philosophies, different approaches, and last 30 to 40 years we have followed, without knowing, neoliberalism, which basically is that you are liberal, you promote competence. So if you are A grader and your neighbor is a B grader, your neighbor, you are valued more than the B grader. But that's where the problem is, because your neighbor, even if she is or he is a B grader, may have something much more, because we are valuing on economic, we are valuing on grades. That's where the problem is coming in. And if we can somehow sort this out and slowly, I mean, at least now we are talking about sports. Otherwise, in my days, it was always, oh, if we are not topper in the school, or if we are not first class, forget sports. My parents will not even let me go out to play. If it was, but now at least with some learning. And I hope that, I really very positive that with the new generation, with new parents, they give much more importance to grades and money than our parents or we have given. And that hopefully will lead to a bit of more sustainable development. At this moment, economic development has happened, and that needs to happen. These 40% of the world poor who live here, they need to be living good life. That is no doubt. So we need economic development, but we need more equitable economic development than we are having right now.
Thank you, Nanji. So more equitable economic development is the key from his speech. So maybe I'd like to request our colleagues to just maybe in 2 sentences, if any final remarks or something that you wanted to contribute, starting with Bindu.
First of all, I would like to thank ISIMOD and Thames International College for letting us be here. And concluding, what I would like to say is that do not look for the change outside, start it within yourself. So, be it in the field of community, environmental, societal, economic development, sustainability, whatever, you should know that, as Nand sir said, I would like to reflect it again and again, that treat yourself as a stakeholder, go for it, do not wait for someone else to bring change that you see, that you dream of. So act now, do not only speak, it is not only about the terminology, it is more about the practice, it is more about the action. So thank you so much.
Thank you Thames College, thank you everyone for inviting me, and I truly enjoyed actually. I don't generally enjoy too much these presentations, etc. Particularly giving presentation is always a headache to me, but I really enjoyed today. And because I really see a lot of hope, and I feel when I become part of you, I feel, oh, I'm getting new ideas, So my message is simple, that please keep trying new ideas and keep asking and challenging your people whom you think they are senior to you, or they are your bosses, or they are your teachers, or they are your political leaders. Keep challenging them. That's where I think they will also open their eyes to new ideas. And new ideas are the only solutions. Someone told me that we talked only about problems. We do talk about solutions whenever we need to, but solutions have to be done more than really talk. So that's also very important, that we do it ourselves, something which is solution oriented.
I think one of the underlying things in this discussion that we've been having, and also one of the main things that I've learned in my life, is that wisdom and understanding can really come from anywhere. And just because something is the conventional way that things have been done doesn't make it the right way to do things. Just because something may seem old-fashioned or too traditional doesn't make it the wrong way to do things. And the way forward, I think, is really to take this wisdom and understanding that we can find in all of these different surprising places and put it together into something new and inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aries.